Denim Couch Podcast. Ooh, whoa, ooh, whoa.
The 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s with Steph with an F.
Hi guys, welcome to the Denim Couch Podcast, where we chill on this denim couch and talk about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Stephanie Tanner. Welcome. Hey guys, it's Stephanie Tanner with the Denim Couch Podcast. And this week's episode is with Peggy McFarland. And it's our first 70s episode. And I'm super stoked about it. So here we go. The next 10 episodes are going to be 70s style. With this episode, I contacted Peggy. She is an amazing lady that I have known for a while. And I just figured she would have something great to say about growing up in the 70s and a different perspective from many people. So I'm excited for you to listen to her story, and I think there's some great stuff you can take away from this episode that we haven't heard yet. So let's just dive in. And my first question for you is, can you tell me a little bit more about your name?
Oh, my name was not common at all. And my mother, I was born in the 50s, so my mother chose my name because of a cheerleader in her high school. And so nobody had the name Peggy in my high school at all. It was just not very common. And I always felt like I had this sort of old-fashioned name. Usually, people that had the name Peggy, their name was Margaret, and it was a nickname for Margaret, but I wasn't even a Margaret, so that was even more unusual.
What was life like back in the 70s?
You know, the thing about the 70s is that you had to go through the 60s to get there. And so I actually went to two different high schools. So when you talk about the 70s, I'm thinking high school. That was, that's when I was in high school. I graduated in 1974. And so I went through the 60s, the latter part of the 60s and into the early 70s. And I was at a high school in Washington. And it was a college town. And it was a very, very wild high school. We had horrendous drugs. The star football players were on speed during the football game, and it was so common, and it was so commonly accepted. And so my freshman year, that was my experience, which was an outcome of the 60s and this drug culture that was so pervasive in the 60s. So then I moved from Washington, and then I did my sophomore, junior, and senior year in conservative Eastern Idaho. And that was a completely different experience. And so I feel like I wasn't living in the 60s anymore. That's how I identify the 70s in my mind was, okay, we made it through all that drug garbage now. I actually get to have some fun high school. And it felt more like that, I want to say the 50s feel where things were still pretty innocent. I loved that experience because I felt like I really had a fun time when I think about the 70s in my high school. So I feel like I kind of experienced all the 3 decades in my high school experience. And so the 70s for me was really a combination of other decades even before mine. But the 70s was my high school heyday. Like my senior year, I remember as just being this wonderful heyday of my life. So fun and so many neat learning experiences.
What did you do for fun in the 70s?
Well, I had a girlfriend that had a really nice, I'm thinking it's a Camaro. And so we would pay her for gas. And it didn't cost very much. Like we could give her a quarter. Everybody in the car would give her a quarter, and we could drive all night. And we would go and just cruise. And there was this little loop that we would do, and route, and everybody else would cruise that route too. And so then you'd run into people, and then you'd pull over the side of the road and you'd talk to them. And we had our favorite place where we'd go get ice cream, and we had a place where you could get a Slurpee, but then they had soft ice cream on top. That was one of my favorite treats. I loved that. And I think Sonic actually still has those. So I think that was one of the big things we did, was cruise around. And of course we had to play pranks and stuff. I remember we had a dozen eggs one time, and when we were cruising the loop and other people were cruising the loop, I remember these boys trying to flirt with us, and we didn't like them, so we threw eggs out of our car at them. And so we didn't do anything really terrible, but we still had enough mischief to make it fun.
What were some popular activities?
I remember my high school being really centered on being involved with cheerleading. I was the school mascot. I was a tiger, and I had to wear a tiger uniform, and I had a big tail and everything. And I was also on the annual staff, so I developed writing skills, and I was involved with my church and had leadership in my church. And I think the adults in my life just tried to keep up with my schedule, really. But we also had a family farm, a potato farm that was up in the hills, and it did not matter how late I stayed out on Friday night. I had to get up at 6 o'clock on Saturday morning and go help out at my grandparents' and my uncle's farm. And so there was a lot of times I was kind of teary-eyed because I'd stayed out late. And they didn't really give me a curfew, because you just knew, look, if you stay out late, you're going to be tortured on Saturday morning. And so if I stayed out late, I was tortured. So I had to stay awake all day and help out. And especially during potato harvest, then we worked long hours on Saturday helping. So I remember it was kind of small town. I mean, the town was probably 25,000 or so, and then there was little towns around. So it was still kind of that small town feel. I just remember it being very fun, and I remember feeling like I got a lot of opportunities to develop my talents. Well, and I don't think we were so worried. Well, I know we weren't so worried about all the dangers and all the really serious temptations that I'd experienced when I went to high school in Washington, and just the flavor of the community. I don't think my parents, my family, had a lot of worry that I was going to go out and get in trouble and do bad things, because it wasn't the norm. The norm was sticking more with doing things that were proactive. And there was a lot of proactive, positive kind of fun. And I remember kids being very involved in school activities. I wasn't particularly athletic, so I wasn't a sport person. But there was just so many options of things that you could do. I actually had been in band for like 6 years, but I chose not to, because there were so many other options of things to do that were positive. The thing I remember that was a very fun memory is we had a group of kids in our high school that had a band, and so they would play. We'd have victory dances after the games. It didn't matter if we won or not. Actually, our high school team was so bad, we made Sports Illustrated as one of the worst teams in the nation. But we'd still have these victory dances. We call them victory dances after the football games, and we had these kids had a good band. They were good, and we would just have so much fun at these dances, and it was just fun. It was still kind of, I wouldn't say we were 50s rock and roll. We danced to the stuff that was from the 70's, but it was still fun, where you could do that. You could do the twist if you wanted. You know, it was just really, I remember that being so fun. I don't remember disco really coming around until after I was married, out of high school, and probably the later 70's for us, way late into the 70's. And so we were not into disco at all.
Do you have any favorite memories from the 70's?
Some of my favorite memories, wow. I I do look back at my high school time, and I had a lot of favorite memories. I think memories for me are always connected to my relationships with people. And I'm at the age where people that I was connected to and that I loved have actually started to pass away. And one of my dear friends from high school and her husband died in 2019, both of them. And that was such an awakening for me, because I realized, I'm in my 60s now, and my life, I'm at a place in life where I'm actually seeing that, wow, there really is an end to this. Like this is a real mortal life that has a limited time span, and for some it's shorter than others. And I think that's been an awakening. But as I think back, I've had a lot of chance to reflect on this friend that passed away. Her name was Wendy. And she was the cheer queen when I was on the cheerleading squad. And we had so many awesome bus trips, because back then we were on the east side of the state. We would come over to Boise area to play teams. And so we'd have these long bus trips. And we'd have what's called the Rooter bus. And so the Rooters would take their own bus. It wasn't just the teams. The people that wanted to go, the band, the pep club, all these people. And they had a Rooter bus, and we would go. And so we had so much fun and long talks on the Rooter bus. And I remember that being a very sweet memory. And we got to do a lot of traveling together and stayed at different homes. Host homes would host the cheerleading squad. And I think the relationships were the highlight. And in fact, somebody that I hadn't talked to literally for 40 years contacted me on Facebook and said, hey, I just want you to know, there was a girl on our cheer squad that was younger than me. Hey, I just want you to know that thank you for being such a good friend to me. You don't know how much that meant and how that got me over a difficult time. I was shocked. I had no idea. I'm thinking, what did I do? But it's just that you build relationships, and that's what makes it.
What was the style like back in the 70s? What did you wear?
Okay. Well, besides my Tiger uniform, thank heavens I had some other stuff. I went to high school, and we had an honor code. And at first, in my sophomore year, girls were not allowed to wear Levi's to school. And they were just making the change where we didn't have to wear dresses all the time. And it's very cold there, so they were finally allowing so that you could wear slacks, but you were not supposed to wear Levi's, and we didn't. Girls did not wear Levi's to school. We wore nice slacks. And so that was kind of a big deal. And I don't know. I don't remember our styles being that much different than what I wear right now, which is probably why my kids make fun of me all the time. But and girls were definitely not grungy. Like, you did not wear sloppy T-shirts and stuff. Girls were girls, and you were more feminine, I would say. And so that was a little bit different. And lots of skirts and sweaters. Oh, my favorite thing. I still loved knee-high socks. And so you'd wear skirts, and then you'd wear these knee-high socks, and then you'd wear some kind of shoes. And I always loved knee-highs. And even when they weren't cool anymore, I still wanted to wear knee-highs with my skirts. But you can tell I've had a hard time learning how to be cool, because I just want to be stuck in high school with what I used to wear. So I remember, and we had to wear those black and white Oxfords, they're not loafers. They were these Oxford shoes that were tie shoes that were actually from the 50s. We had to wear those to be in pep club. The kind of stuff we wore in the pep club was actually a carryover from the 50s. So we had to wear those black and white saddle shoes with bobby socks. And I thought bobby socks were really the bomb too. I loved those as well. It's funny that those are the things that stand out to me. And bulky sweaters, I still remember wearing bulky sweaters. And we had lots of layers in our hair, and we had our own style of having mullets. I remember a lot of the boys wore their hair longer back then. A lot of my friends wore their hair long, and actually they still do. That's the funny thing, and I talk about this with my hairdresser. Wherever you grew up in your high school period, your hairstyle carries over from that. And I see some of these people from my high school, they're still wearing their hair the same way, and I don't think mine's that much different or has been. They still wrap their hair a ton. I remember my aunt rolling her hair in orange juice cans after the orange juice was gone, and she was using that for her rollers. And then she'd rat it, so you wanted to have a lot of height in your hair. That was a big deal. It could be straight on the bottom, but you wanted to have a lot of height in your hair. So later in the 70s, we didn't exactly have that style, but still, you wanted to have a lot of height in your hair.
What made you happy back in the 70s?
What brought me happiness? Well, I mentioned relationships, and I think relationships were a big part of my happiness. And I think there's a downside to that, where you can be so focused on having relationships and making other people happy that you forget who you are and what you need to be doing to develop yourself as a person. So I think for the most part, I developed a pretty good sense of real confidence, where even though I had good relationships, I had a sense of what was important to me. And I think that was a really good time of spiritually growing for me. I think I just was kind of a rowdy kid, and I was always kind of a free thinker and had lots and lots of questions. And I had a lot of questions during that time of my life, and that hasn't changed about me. I still do. And I think that was the time where I really was able to search out and have good mentors and have a lot of spiritual questions answered and feel like I had a place to fit in spiritually. That was a big deal. My parents had been divorced, and that really rocked my world, and it happened in junior high, and I really felt this struggle of, where do I fit in? My family's kind of a mess, and my life feels like it's just different than other people, and so where do I fit in? And I feel like during that high school time, I felt a lot of those answers, and that was happiness, because then you start to get a little sense of, okay, I know what I'm about, I know what's important to me, and that was a good thing.
How would you compare your childhood or teenage years to today's kids?
That's a really good question, because as a therapist and who has a specialty of working with teenage girls, I think I am so glad that I did not have to navigate what they have to navigate today. I think the media and the cultural messages are so harmful. It's just so toxic for the self-image and the body image that girls have. And we really did not have that. We did not have the same kind of pressures. I mean, every age has had temptations. We didn't have the pressure to be thin or to look a certain way or to wear a bunch of makeup and stuff. I remember my friends having all kinds of body types, and nobody cared. And we didn't have eating disorders back then. And I don't remember any of my friends struggling with anxiety or depression, because we just had so much more support from the culture and what is healthy. And we weren't feeling like we had to compare ourselves too much. It was just so much more peaceful as far as all that mental clutter in your head that comes from busy social media and all the hubbub that we have in our society today. So I'm thankful that I got to grow up in a time where I can remember the culture supporting good things and not tearing you down so much. Oh, and you'll talk to school counselors. I did a training for some school counselors, and they said they cannot believe it. Some of them have been working as long as 15 years, and they go, in the last 5 years, the level of problems we're dealing with, we are literally blown away. We cannot believe it. We cannot believe the change in a 5-year period.
And it's crazy because in those 5 years, I mean, I think the big shift for me personally was like the Instagram and the apps, because they're readily available at your fingertips. Whereas before we would have to seek out, and maybe not seek out, but, you know, we'd be at friends' houses and seeing horrible things like on the TV, whereas now it's on your phone. And when I was in high school, I had a phone that like flipped out, but I didn't have access to apps or Instagram or any of that, you know?
Right.
So I think
and you don't have to volunteer to be exposed to it, because you just go to the grocery store. You just go get groceries, and you've got garbage on both sides of you.
Uh-huh.
And none of it is sending supportive messages about what women's bodies really look like, about what really makes women happy. They're all sending messages that are unconscious, like they're hitting your unconscious and you don't even know how you're being affected by it, but they're distressing. And I think we all feel a sense of this, and I think that's why we have a lot of anxiety. We just don't totally know where it's coming from, because it's almost invisible, but it's definitely there and it's harmful. We just did not have that. Like, we just had things that supported women more for that nurturing part of ourselves, and still supported you in getting an education and developing yourself, but there was still a lot that supported you for nurturing things and loving your family. And, you know, when you're a mom and your body's going to go through all these changes, the culture supported your body in that. There wasn't all this pressure to look a certain way and be a certain way that was almost kind of anti-mother, because we have that now, because women's bodies have to be tight stomachs and, you know, no thighs and hips. Well, that's part of reproduction. You get a poochy tummy after you've had a baby. We don't have things in our media that supports those realities for women. It's a pressure. Like the minute your baby comes out, oh my gosh, I've got to hurry and get in shape. You don't even get a chance to just enjoy the whole feeling of being a mom, because there is this unspoken pressure. We did not have that. I made all my own maternity smocks. I really loved to sew, and some of the stuff I made was probably horrendous, but I was still really proud of myself, and I still felt comfortable wearing something that was homemade. And I made all of my maternity smocks, and they were these big tents. Nobody cared. Like, that was fine. You didn't have to keep a tight little bum to be able to fit into the styles like they do now. Even for pregnant women have to wear those kind of styles. We didn't have that. You just wore a big tent, and it was great. You were so much more supported in what is real for women's bodies. That's the difference. You were very supported for what women's bodies naturally do and how they naturally change through all the different life cycles that women have. We know the culture is not going to support us in our mom bodies. Mm-hmm. And we can be healthy, but we don't have to have this stress of looking this certain way that's portrayed in our culture now.
So I love this episode because it's dealing with the topic that we haven't really gotten into that specifically before. And so this topic was really interesting to me because I feel these pressures, which is normal. That's just life, and that's just dealing with culture and that type of thing. But I thought it was so crazy because I can't imagine a world where you're pregnant and you just wear whatever you want and you are completely supported by the entire community and the entire culture. Not to say that people aren't supportive. I just think that the messaging that is sent through social media is not supportive of a more relaxed, wear whatever you want because you're pregnant type of culture. And I remember I was telling Peggy that my mom wore this tent outfit and it actually looked decent on her, but we always make fun of it because it's completely opposite of what the cultural norm is now. I mean, a tent versus really tight clothing is definitely a contrast. And yeah, I do remember what she wore, and it looked good, and she was relaxed, and it wasn't a thing. That I think that's the most important thing. It wasn't a thing. You just wore what you wore. And so I just find this more interesting than anything. The one thing I took away from it is that I am learning to stop caring about these pressures and expectations. And that is so freeing to me. If I feel like I need to be posting a certain way or having the world perceive me a certain way through dress or through cultural trends, such as updating social media on my kid's life or my life in a certain way, there's really no need for me to do that. And I think the greatest thing that I took away from this interview is that what I should be posting and doing is just whatever I feel like. And that's basically it. It's kind of a freeing feeling to go against the norm. And I love it. And so my goal this week and the next couple of weeks is to start posting or not even posting, because I don't have to post either. So when I do posting something that's truly me with no influence from outside cultural pressures. Like I said, I don't think it's that big of a deal. We've got bigger fish to fry right now. But it is freeing to be able to just be yourself and being able to post or do things that aren't fashionable or aren't trendy, doing what you like to do when you take out all of the cultural expectations. Yeah, I loved it. I think obviously the 70s wasn't perfect, but one thing that was cool is that you just were celebrated because you were having a baby and they supported you in whatever you wore. And in fact, it wasn't a thing. It wasn't a pressure to look a certain fit way when you're pregnant. That's not the goal. And how comforting would that have been? Whereas now, we just add one more pressure to the list of pressures, all brought on by social media. I am really excited to get the 70s rolling, and I've got lots of questions to ask. I'm curious about disco and styles and media. And I'm excited. I will leave it at that. Have a great day. Have a great week. And I will talk to you soon. Bye. Wait. You can't miss the embarrassing story of the week. No. Okay. It's that time. It's Steph with an F's embarrassing story of the week. Okay, so this week's embarrassing story, I spent hours and hours trying to think of it because I swear at one point this week I was like, that's it. That's going to be my embarrassing story. And it was embarrassing. And since then, I have not been able to remember what that was, which is very disappointing. I've spent hours. I went through each day, going through each day, trying to think about what I did and what happened. And the only thing I was left with was I had a call scheduled with a wonderful client who speaks Spanish. And sadly, I do not speak Spanish. My husband speaks Spanish and a few people at work speak Spanish. And so we ultimately decided that one of the persons at work would hop on the call for me, but I had to host the call since I was the one who scheduled it. The embarrassing part was that we were in the office and I was talking with some coworkers about this call, and I said, well, maybe I should probably be on the call and take notes just so that said coworker doesn't have to. And we're all just sitting there like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then one of my coworkers goes, yeah, except for how are you going to take notes since you don't know Spanish? She was right, and it was really funny. And I hopped on the call and I didn't know Spanish and I understood a couple words, and therefore my note taking was very unsuccessful. I didn't even try, but the thought of me trying to is funny. Anyways, I can think of at least 3 things that people around me did that were embarrassing this week. So maybe I'm just passing it off to other people. But I could not say what they did, for they are dear to me and listen to this podcast, and I would not do that to them. Anyways, I hope you all have a great week. I will talk to you soon. Bye.
If you came here for mental health help, please go visit your doctor. If you're looking for some mental health tips, Dr. Daniel Amen is someone I follow. I love what he has to say and offer. I think his website is brainhealthassessment.com, and he just has some awesome checklist items that go over brain health habits that you should be doing to have better brain health. I want to say there's like 5 to 10 items, and if you have those, if you're working on those habits and trying to improve them to improve your brain health, you'll also improve your happiness level, because brain health equals mental health. So keep your brains happy and healthy, and check out Dr. Daniel Amen. This is not sponsored. I just really like what he has to say, and I think it's really beneficial. I think it can help a lot of people. It's actually very matter of fact, kind of obvious, but yet we neglect so many of these habits daily. And I do feel like, if you're feeling unhappy, that may be one of the reasons you're unhappy, because you're neglecting your brain health, which is also your mental health. And trying to improve these habits could really help. So check him out. If you have any stories from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, please get in contact with me. Let's chat. I want nothing more than to chat about the past. I want nothing more than to chat about the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. If you have any specific questions that I'm not asking that you would like to know about these eras while interviewing these people, please let me know. I would love some advice, and I would love your input. So what would you guys like to know?